Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Remember when I told you all that whenever you see something or hear something or read something that says liquidity, quantitative easing, or stimulus, to go ahead and change that word with "we are stealing your wealth"? Well, this article here covers how the Federal Reserve, amongst other banks, the G4 banks, are going to be adding liquidity to our financial system over the 2021 year. I'm going to go ahead and break down some of this article for you all so that you can understand exactly how this is going to affect us as far as prices, not in just consumer goods, but also the stock market. The stock market, in my opinion, is going to flourish next year. It is going to flourish. And why do I think they're doing this? Because if they don't, the stock market will collapse. Right now, the stock market has the Federal Reserve held hostage, which means that if the Federal Reserve doesn't continue to print and add liquidity to the market, that it will collapse. Because the stock market does not represent the economy. If the stock market represented the economy, it means that the stocks of those companies would reflect what the free market says they are worth. Morgan Stanley's chief equity strategist, Michael Wilson, voiced concerns about the continuation of the overcooked equity rally, expecting a drawdown into year-end for the simple reason that both fiscal and now monetary policy have become reactive rather than proactive. And this is what I meant about that the markets, the stock market, has the Federal Reserve held hostage. Because the Federal Reserve now is reactive as to how the stock market is doing. So for example, let's say that on Monday, the stock markets went down 10%. The Federal Reserve would resume monetary policy by printing and putting that money out into the system, where most of it goes into the stock market, the housing market. That is how the stock market is holding the Federal Reserve hostage. For markets, that becomes the itch that needs to be scratched, i.e., market pressure is necessary and likely to get Congress and or the Fed to act. Like I said, they're holding the Fed hostage. It's just like these airline companies that keep asking for billions of dollars in bailouts. They really don't ask for it, but they say, well, if we don't get these $25 billion in bailouts, we're going to have to go ahead and lay off or furlough or fire X number of thousands of people. Continuing on. And yet, once the coming period of volatility is over, Morgan Stanley sees the bull market continuing, with the S&P expected to rise another 10% over the next 12 months. And it's very easy to see that coming, ladies and gentlemen, because right now the Federal Reserve is planning on printing an additional $120 billion a month for the next year. So next year alone, 2021, the Federal Reserve is going to inject an additional $1.44 trillion into the markets. Of course, the stock market is going to continue to go up. But how long will that last, ladies and gentlemen? The stock market is nothing but a casino. It's playing a game of Ring Around the Rosie, where every time that you go around, a chair is taken out and someone is left without a spot to sit. At least I think that's the game, right? Ring Around the Rosie. That's what the stock market is. And the only way to keep it propped up is to continue to add liquidity to it. So that people say, the average person says, oh, I'm going to get into that because it's doing really good. While the people that are in the know, they're called the smart money, you know, the billionaires, CEOs of corporations that are buying back their own stock, while they themselves are selling their stock as everyone else gets in. It continues on here saying that while it was once seen in poor form to assign a bullish thesis to central bank liquidity and intervention, Those days are long gone, and they are. And it says here, liquidity will come from continued central bank quantitative easing, central bank purchases of private sector assets. See, ladies and gentlemen, central banks don't really put money into the economy. What happens is they purchase government bonds. So if the government says, I need $1 trillion, the central bank will print $1 trillion and hand it over to the government. Then the government spends that money. That's how the money gets into the economy. Or they go ahead and now they purchase corporate bonds or mortgage-backed securities. So if they purchase, let's say, mortgage-backed securities from a bank, the bank gives them the mortgage-backed securities, the central bank gives them the money that they printed out of thin air, and then the bank can use those funds to either invest it in the stock market, which is an atrocity in my opinion, or they can use those funds to loan out into the economy. Right now, banks are not really doing a lot of lending. That is why we haven't seen the inflation that would take place if they did. Remember, the more that banks lend, the higher that the velocity of money will become. How is it that this creates financial inequality? It's how they spend the money that's printed. For example, let's say the central bank gives the government $1 trillion. Where is the government going to spend that money? Well, as we saw during the last stimulus, people got $1,200. But corporations got billions and billions of dollars. So those institutions that receive the money first, they are able to spend those monies while those Federal Reserve notes still have all their value. Once those monies start to be put into the economy, that's when those monies start to dilute the other monies that are in the economy, making them worth less. So whoever gets the money first has all the benefit, or most of the benefit, because by the time that it gets down to you, those dollars are already worth less than what they were when they were first created. So it says here, central banks' purchases of private sector assets, i.e. government bonds, corporate bonds, and mortgage-backed securities, feature heavily in both types of liquidity injection. And it shows down here how much on a monthly basis the Federal Reserve is looking to print next year. And that's $120 billion a month that the Federal Reserve expects to inject into our financial system next year. So if you saw a video I did not too long ago, our M2 money supply, which means the money that's circulating out there in our economy, in your checking accounts, savings accounts, all of these financial assets that you may have, was about $19 trillion, right? $19 trillion. Now, if you take $1.44 trillion divided by 19, then multiply that by 100. That is the percentage of money that is going to be more so than what it is this year and what it is right now. Meaning that our economy is going to have an injection of 7.5% more money in it than what it does today. And that is what will cause the price and things to go up. More so, I believe, stock market, housing market is what's going to go up the most. But let me ask you a question. They're going to devalue the money that we have right now in our economy by roughly 7.5%. Are you going to get a 7.5% raise next year? Or if you're on Social Security, are you going to get a 7.5% or higher raise on your Social Security or retirement next year? More than likely you're not, which means that you are going to be below the ball as far as losing wealth. Now, if they added this 7.5% to the money supply, and you were looking at getting a 7.5 or more percent raise next year, then you would be even or a little bit above what the inflation is. But salaries and incomes very rarely ever keep up with inflation, especially when that inflation is being created by the Federal Reserve / the government. So this is effectively stealing wealth from you. And this debt, ladies and gentlemen, this money that's being created, there's nothing that is creating this money except for a finger on a keyboard. And there's no way that wealth can be created when no energy was expended to create that wealth. So make a plan and go ahead and execute that plan. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. Remember that I have a live stream today at 12 noon Alaska time, so we will see you then. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. This is Alaska Prepper. I'm out.